All right, everyone, welcome back. Are you ready for another deep dive? Because today we're tackling a story that's as American as baseball itself, but with a whole lot of intrigue. It's the Balco scandal. We'll be looking at an episode of the American Scandal podcast that gets right into the thick of things. Now, you might think doping scandals are just about cheating, but this one goes way deeper. We're talking about Victor Conte, the founder of Balso, his relentless pursuit of kick performance and a system that was just ripe for exploitation.
It really is fascinating how this scandal kind of brings all of that to the forefront. Those ambitions and the scientific innovation and just that drive to win no matter the cost.
Exactly. So let's unpack this a little bit. Conte starts out with this dream of helping athletes reach their absolute potential using like cutting edge technology. He even had this what's called an ICP spectrometer. It's like imagine a high-tech fingerprint scanner but for your body's nutritional needs. It analyzed like what athletes were missing and helped Conte like tailor these specific substances for them.
He was really ahead of his time using that kind of technology to analyze athletes' needs. And initially, his business model was all about gaining recognition. He offered his services for free, hoping athletes would wear Belso gear at the Olympics.
Yeah, so he's got this grand vision, but of course, like any good story, there are bumps in the road, right? One of his early athletes was Greg Tefrels, a shot putter. And Tefrels sees huge improvements under Conti's guidance. He rises through the ranks, becomes a top contender. But at the 1988 Seoul Olympics, he doesn't medal. He finishes ninth.
And that's where it gets interesting because the 1988 Olympics, especially in track and field, were notorious for doping. I mean, the East German team, for example, was engaged in this massive state-sponsored doping program.
Yeah.
And later on, Tefrels himself gets busted for steroid use. So it makes you wonder about Conte's involvement, even though nothing concrete ever really came out at that time.
Right. It's like this shadow hanging over those early years. Plus, Conti was dealing with financial struggles, a messy divorce, custody battles. Talk about pressure. But then 1996 rolls around and enter Bill Romanowski. Now, this is where the story takes a turn.
Yeah, Romanowski's arrival could have been a real game changer for Balco. I mean, he was this legendary NFL linebacker known for his aggression on the field and his willingness to really push the boundaries. Plus, he had the resources and the notoriety to attract other high-profile athletes to Conti.
Totally, but their personalities were like night and day. You couldn't find a bigger contrast. Conte, the science-minded guy, seems almost intimidated by Romanowski's intensity. And Romanowski, he's this no-nonsense, results-driven athlete with a huge budget for, whatever gives him an edge. The podcast even tells this hilarious story about Romanowski joking about peeing on Conte's expensive ICP machine.
Yeah, that story really highlights their totally different approaches. But here's what's crucial. Conti discovers that Romanowski has low copper levels, which is a potential indicator of steroid use. And this might be where Conte shifted from simply addressing deficiencies to actively providing banned substances. It's a turning point, even if we don't have hard proof.
It really does feel like this crossroads. And around this time, you've got another big name entering the picture, Barry Bonds. Now, Bonds was initially against steroid use. He even spoke out against it. But he was frustrated by what he saw as an uneven playing field. Guys like Mark McGwire were smashing home run records, and rumors of steroid use were swirling. Bonds was struggling with his image and the pressure to compete.
And you have to understand the context of baseball at the time. It had this long history of turning a blind eye to performance enhancement. From tobacco endorsements to amphetamine use, the focus on profits often overshadowed the need for a solid drug testing program. Conte saw an opportunity in the system. He could provide what players and owners both seem to want, peak performance, without those positive drug tests.
So what does Conti do? He gets creative, right? He develops ZMA, which is a completely legal supplement with zinc and magnesium, and markets it as the secret weapon for athletic success. It's brilliant, really. Star athletes are endorsing ZMA publicly, but behind the scenes, he's allegedly providing them with banned substances.
Yeah, it was a clever way to operate under the radar, taking advantage of the loopholes and the culture that downplayed the issue of doping.
He was essentially gaming the system using his scientific knowledge and marketing skills to become a major player in what would become one of the biggest sports scandals ever. So Conti's built this whole network, like this underground system where athletes could get these performance-enhancing drugs while keeping up appearances, like this double life ZMA as the public face and the banned stuff hidden in the shadows. But how did he even get those substances? Where did they come from?
Well, that's where the story gets a little bit murky. The podcast doesn't really dive deep into Conti's suppliers, but we know he had connections, even some overseas. He was always on the hunt for new substances, experimenting with dosages, trying to stay ahead of those drug tests.
It's like he was this rogue scientist, outsmarting the system with his secret lab and network of suppliers. Makes you wonder about the athletes who were drawn to Balco. Were they all just obsessed with winning, no matter what?
Well, it's a complicated question. Some athletes were probably driven by pure ambition, wanting to be the absolute best, even if it meant bending the rules. Others might have felt pressured by the competition, thinking that everyone else was doping and they had to do it too, or they'd get left behind.
It's like classic dilemma, cheat or lose. But there had to be risks involved. What if they got caught?
Oh, the risks were huge. Getting caught meant suspensions, lost sponsorships, a tarnished reputation. But Conti, with his meticulous methods and knowledge of drug testing, offered them this false sense of security. He made them believe that they could use these substances and get away with it.
He was playing a high-stakes game, always thinking a few steps ahead. He must have been incredibly persuasive to convince these elite athletes to trust him with their careers. But how did he stay under the radar for so long?
A few things helped him. He was cautious, discreet, and built this aura of legitimacy around ZMA. Plus, drug testing in sports, especially baseball, wasn't as strict as it is today. The authorities weren't as vigilant, and the testing methods weren't as advanced.
So it was a perfect storm. Conti's ambition, his scientific knowledge, this flawed system, and a culture that valued winning above everything else. It all came together to create this massive scandal. But how did it all unravel? How did the truth finally come out?
Well, that's where our other main character enters the scene. Jeff Nowitzki, the IRS agent who spearheaded the investigation. He had a personal vendetta against steroid use in sports and saw Balco as a major target. His investigation began with something totally unexpected.
Dumpster diving.
Dumpster diving, you're getting right.
No kidding. Nowitzki wasn't after Conti for tax evasion or anything like that. He suspected Balco was distributing illegal substances, but he needed evidence. So he went through Balco's trash, hoping to find something that would incriminate them.
That's dedication. But did he actually find anything useful in the dumpster?
He struck gold. Nowitzki found discarded syringes, vials, and documents that pointed to Balco's illegal activities. This was his breakthrough, giving him what he needed to launch a full-blown investigation.
It sounds like something out of a detective movie. The relentless investigator digging through the trash to expose this huge conspiracy. But how did Conti react when the IRS came knocking? Did he try to cover his tracks?
At first, Conti denied everything. He claimed Balco was a legitimate business helping athletes improve performance through legal means. He even tried to play the victim, saying he was being unfairly targeted because he worked with high-profile athletes.
Classic deflection tactic. Shift the blame and act innocent. But Nowitzki wasn't fooled. He was determined to bring Conti down. But how did he get enough evidence to build a solid case? It's not like athletes would readily admit to using banned substances.
Nowitzki's persistence and a little luck played a big role. He found a former Balco employee who was disgruntled and willing to cooperate with the investigation. This insider gave him critical information about how Conti ran his operation, including details about the substances and the athletes involved.
It's the ultimate betrayal. The disgruntled employee, maybe seeking revenge or justice, turns on their boss and exposes the whole scheme. What about the athletes? Were they caught up in the investigation?
Yes, Nowitzki used this insider information and the evidence from the dumpster to get a search warrant for Balco's lab. During the raid, they seized tons of documents, including a list of athletes who had received substances from Conti.
Wow, that list must have been explosive. All those big names exposed for their involvement in the scandal.
It was a turning point, showing how far Balco's reach extended and implicating some of the biggest stars in sports. But Conti wasn't giving up easily. He hired top lawyers and launched a PR campaign to defend himself.
It's like a legal thriller. Conte, the mastermind, battling it out with this relentless investigator, both trying to win over public opinion and the legal system. But did he manage to escape the consequences? So Conte's built this empire, he's got top lawyers, a whole PR machine running. Did he actually face any real consequences for all of this?
Oh, he did. But it was a long and complicated process.
Mm-hmm.
His legal team, they used every trick in the book to delay the case and challenge the prosecution. They claimed the search warrant was flawed, the evidence was contaminated, and Conti's actions weren't technically illegal under the laws at the time.
It's amazing how these legal battles can just drag on and on. But in the end, did Conti actually go to jail? What about the athletes who were involved? Did they face any repercussions?
Well, in 2005, Conti pleaded guilty to distributing steroids and money laundering. He ended up serving 4 months in prison and another 4 months of house arrest. Some people argued that the sentence was too light, considering the scale of the scandal.
Yeah, 4 months doesn't seem like much compared to the damage he caused to the integrity of sports. And what about the athletes? Were any big names caught up in this?
Oh, absolutely. The list of athletes linked to Balco reads like a who's who of professional sports. Marion Jones, the Olympic track and field star, was stripped of her medals and served 6 months in prison for lying about her steroid use. And Barry Bonds, even though he never failed a drug test, faced perjury charges for allegedly lying to a grand jury about his knowledge of Balco.
It's a cautionary tale, isn't it? It
Yeah.
shows how ambition and the desire for fame can lead even the most talented individuals down a dangerous path. Makes you wonder if it was all worth it in the end.
The Balso scandal definitely forced everyone to take a hard look at the culture of winning at all costs. It made sports leagues, especially Major League Baseball, get serious about cracking down on performance-enhancing drugs. They implemented stricter testing policies and harsher penalties after the scandal broke.
So maybe some good came out of this whole mess. It's strange how a scandal can be the catalyst for positive change.
You could definitely say that. Balso was a wake-up call for professional sports. It exposed the weaknesses in the system, the loopholes that allowed doping to flourish, and the need for a much more comprehensive approach to deterring and detecting drug use.
But even with tougher rules and better testing, you have to wonder if some athletes will always find a way to cheat. Is it even possible to have a truly level playing field?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The science of performance enhancement keeps evolving, and there will always be those who are willing to push the limits and risk getting caught. It's an ongoing battle between athletes, scientists, and the authorities.
So what does this all mean for us? What lessons can we take away from this whole Balso saga? Have we learned anything, or are we just going to keep repeating the same mistakes?
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways from Belsueo is the importance of education, transparency, and a shift in the culture of sports. We need to teach young athletes about the risks of performance-enhancing drugs, not just the physical harm they can cause, but the ethical implications as well.
It's about instilling a sense of integrity and fair play, right? Winning is important, but it shouldn't come at the expense of our values.
Exactly. We need to celebrate athletes who achieve success through hard work, dedication, and playing by the rules.
Mm.
And we need to hold accountable those who choose to cheat regardless of their fame or success.
It's a powerful reminder that sports should be about more than just winning. It should be about pushing the limits of human potential while upholding the values of fair play and sportsmanship.
And perhaps the most important lesson from Balco is that the pursuit of excellence should never come at the cost of our integrity. That's a lesson that applies to all of us, not just athletes. It challenges us to examine our own ambitions and the choices we make in pursuing our goals.
Well said, the Balco scandal may be behind us, but the questions it raised about ethics, ambition, and the pursuit of excellence are still relevant today. And that wraps up our deep dive into the Balco scandal. It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It certainly has, and it's given us all a lot to think about.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the things that matter.